Okay, let's take a look at working with some operations dealing with polynomials. Polynomials are these expressions that have more than one part. So we've got some parts being added or subtracted together. Now the first thing we're going to do is talk about how to add these guys together. Now I prefer, just because of my own personal preference, what's called the vertical addition method. So we're going to write down the first polynomial. And then we're going to write down the second one, lining up the like terms, because to me, that makes it a lot easier to add together if you've got those like terms right in a row. So what we're going to do is then add the numbers out in front, or subtract as appropriate by the sign. So we see the 4 plus the 2 gives us 6y squared. The 12 and the minus 3 combines gives us a positive 9y, and the 3 minus 6 gives us a negative 3. And I just like to line them up because then you're just adding right away. Sometimes if you try and add them in a straight line, you forget what's a like term, and that can make your life a little bit more challenging. When we subtract, we're actually going to do much the same thing. We're going to write the first term just as it is. And I, again, prefer the vertical method where you're going to line up the like terms. However, when we subtract, we're actually going to make the second one opposite. So every single term, and it's important you do every single term, is going to get the opposite sign. So the negative 3 is going to change to a positive 3, and the negative 6 is going to change to a positive 6. After that, it's actually exactly the same idea where we combine those numbers out in front, only you just got to really be careful of your signs. 4 minus 2 is 2. So we have 2y squareds. A lot of people are very tempted to cancel out the y squareds, and that's not the case, because this is essentially saying I have 4 apples, I take away 2 apples. I'm left with 2 apples. I have 4y squareds, I take away 2y squareds, I'm left with 2y squareds. The actual letter or variable does not go away. 12 plus 3 is 15, and 3 plus 6 is 9. So you can see we do get different answers when we add and subtract, and that's not because you've changed any of the numbers, it's because you've changed those signs. Okay, now let's take a look at this multiplication. Now multiplication is this, when we deal with a 2-term and a 3-term, we're actually dealing with distributing. And there's a couple different ways you can approach this. I know the book has a couple of different methods, but what I prefer to do, and this is again one of those things, there's a couple different methods out there, none of them are right or wrong. This is my personal preference, is to kind of use a variation on the vertical method. And I always write the bigger term out first, kind of like you learned how to multiply when you were young. If you were going to multiply something like 20 times 4, you'd write the bigger number on top. And I'm going to do that twice because the first term has 2 parts, so it's 1 for each part. And for the first one, I'm going to multiply by 2a. So I'm going to put the 2a down here. The second one I'm going to multiply by negative 4. And kind of like you learned how to multiply where you share this, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to share that 2a with everybody. So I'm going to have 2 times 3 is 6. A times a squared is a to the 3rd. Remember, there is a little 1 hanging out here. I know you can't see them, but it is there, and you do add those exponents together. Then we move on to 2 times 4 is a positive 8. A times a is an a squared. 2 times a, 2 times negative 5, is negative 10, and there is an a, so you don't want to forget about it. Then I'm going to go ahead and do something similar with the negative 4. I'm going to share that with everybody. It's actually a little bit easier than sharing the 2a because we only have to worry about the number. Negative 4 times a squared is negative 12a squared. Multiplying those numbers out in front, 3 times negative 4. 4 times negative 4 is negative 16. We're going to keep the letter the same. And negative 4 times negative 5 is a positive 20. Don't forget about those negatives and positives. And then we're going to combine these two terms together, much like we did above. And if you'd like to combine them in a straight line, you're more than welcome to and come out with your final answer. I'm going to line them up vertically, the like terms, so you could see how they're combining. And you got to be really careful to line the like terms up. It's really tempting to just write the top number and the bottom number so they're all lined up nice like they were above. But you have to remember an a squared is not a like term with an a cubed. So I want to make sure the like terms are lined up on top of each other. So I'm going to go ahead and add these together. Negative 12 plus 8 is negative 4, adding or subtracting those numbers out in front and keeping the letters the same. Just really watch your negatives. That's where most of the problems come from. Negative 26a plus 20. And this would be your final answer. So that's a brief look at how do we add some polynomials. How do we multiply a bigger polynomial. And the last one we do want to take a look at is going to be multiplying something like this. Okay? So we're going to start with an expression. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. I tend to look at something being squared as saying that's multiplying it by itself. 5 squared is 5 times 5, so this chunk squared is, oh, sorry, that's supposed to be a 2a. I saw the 3 above there and got excited. Is that times itself. Now you can do the multiplication just like I did to distribute. There is a trick when we're multiplying what we call binomials. Each one of these has 2 parts, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 parts. So we can use this trick called FOIL, where we multiply the first times the first and get 4a squared. A times a is a squared. Remember to keep those letters happy. Then we go outer times outer. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. And a times b is just an ab. Similar with the inner times inner, the two middle or the 2 inner terms, which again does give us a negative 6ab. 2 times negative 3, a times b. And then we're going to look at last times last, the last from each parenthesis. And remember, negative times a negative is a positive, 9b squared. The last thing we're going to do is we are going to we're going to combine these like terms. Okay? So we're going to do that by saying negative 6 and negative 6 is negative 12ab. And we'll leave the 9b squared. Now again, if you'd like to line it up and distribute like you did the one above, you can, and you should come out with the same answer. This FOIL trick is just a trick to help you as we work through the what we call a binomial times a binomial. It only works for 2 times 2. 2 parts times 2 parts. It doesn't work for the above, which is why we had to line them up. Okay, so I hope that helps you out with some basic operations using these a little bit more complicated polynomials.